Lunes, la 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 martes, la 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 miércoles, la 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 jueves. Thanks to the New York City public school system in the 80s and 90s, I took Spanish classes in school every year since kindergarten. My earliest memory of Spanish class was learning the Days of the Week song when I was 5 years old, and I never forgot it. Viernes, la 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 sábado, la la domingo, es la semana. Now, I know what you're thinking. Dana, Lopez, didn't you already know Spanish? Why did you have to take it in school? Don't worry, I got this one. I've been getting questions and comments like this my whole life. You're Puerto Rican? You don't look Puerto Rican. You don't even have an accent. Wow, where are you from? You're so well-spoken, so eloquent. And my favorite, why are you trying to sound like a white girl? Wanna be? Okay, let's get into this. I'm happy to answer all your questions. Yes, I am Puerto Rican. I may or may not look Puerto Rican to some, but because of our Spanish, as in Spain, African, and Taino Indian roots, we don't really have a look to us. We're like Skittles, you know, taste the rainbow. I don't have an accent? Really? I mean, every time I say something like, "What are you talking about?" my Long Island-raised children don't hesitate to tell me that my Brooklyn is slipping out. So I don't know what kind of accent I'm supposed to have or not have, but as far as where I'm from, I am, to quote the late, great, notorious B.I.G., AKA Biggie Smalls, representing BK to the fullest. What else? Oh, thank you for telling me that I speak so well, but I don't think that that was meant to be a compliment. And I'm not trying to sound like anybody. All I want to be is me. So I guess the question really is, what defines a real Latina or Latino, Latinx, Latine, Hispanic, Herpanic? I respect whatever term you choose to use if you've done your homework, but I've always asked myself, what makes me Latina? Finding my Latina identity has taken my whole life. I was born in Brooklyn, New York, and both of my parents were born in Puerto Rico. Turns out I'm 100% that chick, to paraphrase the great Lizzo. But because of expectations of other Latinos and non-Latinos, based on my last name, which wasn't always Lopez, but equally as Puerto Rican sounding, my olive skin and my black curly hair, I was a little bit of a puzzle for some, for a few reasons. I have a Puerto Rican / Jewish sister that I share my dad with. We don't say half sister because, let's be real, who has half a sister, right? I have black Latino cousins, Asian Latino cousins. Hell, my husband and my own 2 kids are Ecuadorian, Puerto Rican, and Chinese. I lovingly call them my Ecuaricachinos, and I say I ordered them all from Starbucks. But the questions continued. You're not Catholic? That's a rosary clutching question. I mean, I am now by choice because my parents were always very open-minded and pretty progressive. So I did go to Catholic church sometimes with friends and family, but I also went to Passover Seder with my sister and her family, Pentecostal services with my grandmother, and even the Kingdom Hall with my Jehovah's Witness cousins. More real talk, I was a kid. It was all equally boring. But now, I realize that it shaped the way that I see how families, identities, and character are built. They're like fingerprints or snowflakes. No two are ever the same. And this is probably the biggest one, I didn't speak Spanish growing up in my house. You don't speak Spanish? That's always where I lost all my Latina credibility. Both of my parents are fluent in Spanish, but they were also primarily raised in New York, and they're English dominant. Actually, when I was really little, my parents sometimes used to talk to each other in Spanish when I was around so that I wouldn't understand them. And Mommy, Daddy, they're here. I don't mean to call you out. I'm so sorry. But I get it. It was kind of like their version of spelling out the big words for the kids, right? They were always encouraging. They always encouraged me to become more fluent, and they always encouraged me to learn. Remember the Days of the Week song from kindergarten? My mom never let me pick French or Mandarin or any other language to take in school. She wanted me to learn how to properly speak Spanish, so I didn't really have a choice. But I'm really glad she insisted. But even with the classes, that moment would inevitably come where a family member or another Spanish-speaking person would say to me, "Habla español, do you speak Spanish?" And my go-to response was always the same, "Sí, pero un poquito." Or, "Yeah, but just a little bit." And they would either be extremely disappointed, like, "What kind of Puerto Rican are you?" Or they would completely just go off in Spanish, assuming that I understood every word, like, and I would just be, nod and smile politely, or I would pretend not to hear them so they could repeat themselves, and maybe I'd catch it a little more the second time around, or I would just give a generic sí or no answer and just hope that it was the right one. It was really embarrassing, and it made me think maybe they were right. Maybe I'm not the real deal. But eventually I did learn, and I'm still learning. But sometimes, even now, when I speak Spanish, I get really nervous. I can't always find the right words, my vocabulary is limited, and I often stumble through it because my tongue literally gets twisted. Sometimes I'll start out in Spanish and I'll just completely give up halfway through. But should my lack of complete fluency in Spanish make me any less Latina than anybody else? I decided that it shouldn't. So back in the day, I used to be an actress and a performer, and I was often a stereotype, or the token, even worse. At auditions, I was asked to, give it a little more Latina spitfire, or, talk like Rosie Perez. Rosie Perez, listen, Rosie, I know she's not here. Rosie, I love you. I am a huge fan, and I thank you for paving the way. But at the time, it was a big issue for me. The problem is that the people who were asking me to be a Latina spitfire and talk like Rosie didn't know that there were Latinas like me, with no exaggerated accent and maybe just a little bit of a different kind of fire, right? Now, for the record, I can totally turn on the Rosie of the 90s, like, "Mookie, you better take care of your kids, Mookie." Or, "Billy, when I tell you that I'm thirsty, I don't want you to bring me a glass of water. I want you to sympathize." Do the right thing and white men can't jump. Classics, right? I give all praise to Rosie Perez, Jennifer Lopez, Rita Moreno, because when I started seeing these Latinas on stage and on the big screen, I fell in love. I saw myself. When Lin-Manuel Miranda brought In the Heights to Broadway, I saw it twice, and I cried both times. I couldn't even believe what I was seeing. I had never heard people speaking in Spanish, listening to salsa music, dancing merengue on a Broadway stage. Representation matters, you guys. It's not just a hashtag. So, what makes me Latina? Is it the food that I eat? Is it the smells of sofrito and pasteles and arroz con gandules wafting from the kitchen every Christmas? You're hungry, right? Washed down with a little coquito. Is it the music that I listen to? Salsa, merengue, bachata on the radio? Is it the way that I learned how to dance to that music, trying to mimic my older cousins at the family parties and the way that their hips and their feet move so beautifully and smoothly? Is it the color of my skin? The café con leche tone that for me is more leche than café? Is it the texture of my black curly hair that only the Dominican women in the salon can straighten in just the right way for any special occasion? Yes. What I realized was it was all of those things and so much more. But there's still one thing that continues to be a challenge for me, but I'm a work in progress, so here we go. Hoy, la jueves, tengo 45 años y hablo más de un poquito de español. Todavía estoy nerviosa hablando en español porque me preocupa que algunos latinos se piensan que no soy suficiente. Tal vez mi acento es muy gringa o americana, tal vez mis palabras son equivocadas, pero para mí es muy importante incluir el idioma de mi gente para conectarme a la cultura y para mis hijas también. In English? I'll do it in English. Okay, in English. Today, Thursday, la jueves, I am 45 years old, and I speak more than just a little bit of Spanish. I'm still nervous speaking in Spanish because I'm worried that some Latinos might think that I am not enough. Maybe my accent is a little bit too much like a white girl or too American. Maybe the words that I chose are wrong. But for me, it's so important to include the language of my people to connect to the culture, and for my daughters too. You see, my Latina identity should have never been wrapped up in the expectations of others. I may not be the picture of what someone thinks a Latina is in their head, but it's in my heart. And what it took me all these years to figure out was that I am enough. I share so much with the Latinas in my life, the women in my family, my ancestors, all of the Latinas that I've met along the way, those that I have yet to meet, and those that I never will meet. No matter what our story is, our genetic makeup, where we were born, the level of Spanish that we speak, our straight or curly or wavy hair, the one of 1,000 shades of beautiful brown in our skin, we all share one thing in common. Tenemos el alma de una Latina. We have the soul of a Latina. Y por eso estoy muy orgullosa. And for that, I am very proud. Gracias.